Happy New Year and welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Mendte. On this week's show, a bombing in Nashville, Tennessee brings back bad memories for New Jersey residents and raises concerns about the security of our infrastructure. We'll talk with a former member of the FBI Terrorism Task Force in New Jersey about those concerns. If you take the train to work, you should know that one of the greatest citizen advocates for Jersey transit riders is retiring. David Peter Allen tells us his hope for the future of public transportation in New Jersey. If you think you'll be able to buy pot legally in New Jersey anytime soon, think again. We'll have an update on what happens next. But first, my interview with Errol Dobler, who was a former FBI agent and member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force in both New York and Atlantic City. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I wanted to bring this home, if we could, for a second. I know you live in New Jersey. You've worked in New Jersey. You've worked in the field office in New York. You were in the Anti-Terrorism Task Force. We have horrible memories about bombings and attempted bombings in this area, in New Jersey and New York specifically. And when you hear about something like this, you think, well, this is a possibility here as well. We know it's a possibility. We've been aware of that for a long time. But are you concerned? Would the FBI be concerned about copycats?
Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is because you're always concerned about copycats. What we know now clearly from the girlfriend reaching out to law enforcement a year ago is that he did this over a long period of time. That's why there's no tripwire. Okay, that's why he didn't just go buy a bunch of stuff that you can make a bomb with and then all of a sudden there's notifications. So that's a lesson for would-be bombers. The FBI knows that, right? The law enforcement knows that. But here's what the public forgets. These threats happen a lot. Okay, there are threats that are foiled, dare I say, all the time. When I was working in New York City in the Joint Terrorism Task Force, there was always a plot ongoing, okay? And it was good that the public didn't really know that because that meant we were doing our job, keeping everybody safe. So on the one hand, this gentleman was successful because of his patience. On the other hand, this is kind of scary scenario number one for New York, right? Somebody drives up a truck, plants it in the middle of Times Square, and then puts a bomb out. But we have seen it.
Had the Times Square bomber, as you well know.
Yeah. So we've seen it before. The FBI has seen it before. I promise you, it's something they're looking for. But now people are learning. Now they're going to learn from this. The other bad guys are going to say, "Okay, we just need to be more patient," or whatever it is. So yeah, they're worried about copycats.
So let me just, to clear that up and to bring that home for people, had he gone out and bought a lot of material to make a bomb in a short amount of time, he would have shown up immediately on some watch list.
He would have shown up. There are certain things in place where certain items are purchased for a certain amount. Local law enforcement generally will get notified.
We have a lot of important infrastructure. We have port bridges and tunnels. Does this expose a weakness on how vulnerable our infrastructure can be?
Once again, yes and no. And I hate to give these, it sounds like I'm being wishy-washy. Trust me, when we talk about infrastructure in New York and New Jersey, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, local law enforcement, they know the vulnerabilities. Okay, it's not their job to create the safety nets. It's their job to investigate, is anybody trying to attack those vulnerabilities?
I was told one time by a law enforcement officer that I can't tell you why, but I can assure you that the thoroughfares going from New Jersey to New York are the safest in the country. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that's probably to a degree accurate. They're the safest in the country for places in the country that are targeted. So again, there's a million places in the United States that are 100 times safer than the tunnels and bridges in New York to New Jersey, but that's simply because New York and New Jersey's targeted and some other places aren't.
Nashville isn't a target, isn't a normal target. That surprised everybody. It came out of nowhere. Does that make it more vulnerable, to your point that you just made a second ago? So New York and New Jersey aren't as vulnerable?
I do think it will prompt people to say, look, we don't need to go after the big win in New York, right? We don't need to hit Times Square. This was bad. And this will start to stoke fear in people if the smaller cities are getting hit because nobody's really looking for it. So yeah, I think always when there's a successful attack, the minds of the bad guys start to race. Like, okay, how can we build on that? How can we do better? So yeah, it's obviously a concern.
Let's talk specifically about the Nashville bombing for a second. Still no motive. Maybe there isn't one. Do you think maybe he just wanted to commit suicide in a big way?
Again, I do think we're going to find some more answers. Okay, so now all of a sudden we have a girlfriend saying, I reported that he was building a bomb. What else is she telling them? Okay, she's now obviously got some information about his state of mind, okay, or can point investigators to somebody else, perhaps who investigators didn't know about that might have been close to the bomber.
They know a lot more that we don't know.
Yes, 100%. 100%. And they're doing the right thing. Information is coming out in an appropriate amount, right? They can't, when there's been a successful attack, speculation, this is what me and you do. We speculate, right? Because we're not in law enforcement, right? We're not in the middle of it right now. They're being very responsible. They're being responsible, putting out that, hey, we missed it. We missed it. Somebody did report this, and for whatever reason, we couldn't get close enough.
You're in the anti-terrorism task force. You were on the anti-terrorism task force. Can we say this is not a terrorist attack at this point?
No, I don't think we can say that. It's wanton destruction to cause fear. Look, okay, if he wanted to just commit suicide, he could have done a million different things. There's no other way to describe this than a terrorist attack. Domestic terrorism, sure. International terrorism, probably not.
Doesn't that usually have a cause? I mean, is there a crusade or something you believe in, or a specific target? That doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, look, and again, ideology is normally a prerequisite around terrorist attack. But when you do something that is so inherently and historically a terrorist tool, right, a car bomb, an RV bomb, what else could you possibly say?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You're a wealth of information. I really appreciate it.
No, Larry, it's my pleasure to be on here.
Former FBI agent Errol Dobler. Errol is also the author of this book, The Process, Art and Science of Leadership. Still to come on Jersey Matters, after 35 years, New Jersey's most prominent citizen advocate for Jersey Transit riders is retiring. We'll talk with David Peter Allen next.